Hello, everybody. Today with us, we have Tina Vinod, Head Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks, I remember in the year 14-15 when I had walked into their premises, felt very warm, very welcoming to an outsider like me. I can't put a finger and say that this is what made me very welcoming or this conversation made me feel nice about it, but the entire environment vibe was like that. So thank you, Tina. I'm sure a lot of effort has gone from all of you to make that kind of an environment.
The vibrancy and the culture of the organization is such that there's a lot of positive energy on the floor.
Yeah, I know from last 1 year that you all are in this.
Yes.
It is a different environment.
Yes.
So Tina, a lot of people, a lot of my clients, a lot of folks that I speak to about diversity and inclusion, I always give ThoughtWorks as an example. And I always think what ThoughtWorks would have done in this situation. So asking a very upfront question, can you share with us few initiatives that ThoughtWorks had done towards D&I that could be learning for various organizations?
It may sound very cliched, but diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that we have been ingrained in the organizational culture for a very, very long time, literally from when our founder, Roy Singham, founded ThoughtWorks. And it happened not with using the actual words diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? But it was about we as an organization, what is our calling beyond just being a profitable business, right? What else should we be doing as an organization? And how do we create a space that's safe and equitable for all, I think has been interwoven into the organizational culture. I can give you a recent example, right? Every few years we go back and we do this global exercise, which is about what is the purpose of ThoughtWorks? Why do we exist? And we take a lot of inputs from ThoughtWorkers across the globe. So it's a huge exercise that's run. Sometimes an external organization comes and runs it for us. When we did that entire exercise, we came up with a very 5-lens approach, and that 5-lens approach is there on our website. But the center of it all was the fact that, and the main statement and the purpose statement is create extraordinary impact on the world through our culture and our technology excellence. So culture plays an extremely integral part of who we are, right? And in that 5-part lens that we have at ThoughtWorks, of course, there is the whole thing around revolutionizing the tech industry, around being awesome partners to our client, commercial success, being a vibrant community. But there is also the lens about amplifying positive social change and advocating for an equitable tech future. Now, this vision has not come from the leadership team. This came from a lot of thought workers from across the globe who participated in this entire exercise. I have to call out that this is not just a vision that is there for individuals at ThoughtWorks or the leadership team, but it's a very collective thing that we have. We usually send out these mails, right? Like someone new joined us and there is this usual set of questions that you have. Why did you join ThoughtWorks, right? And culture is one of the top things that come up as a reason to join ThoughtWorks. So I do think it's interwoven into the organizational culture, and that is one of the primary reasons. In the last 6-7 years, we become very intentional about how we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion in the organization, right? Gender inclusion has always been a focus. It's not that it's there last year, it was there the last 5 years. It's always been there. We've existed for 25 plus years. Women in technology, right? That is a very, very important area of focus for us. And we have a goal of being 40% women in tech by 2022. And when we look at this, right, what is this goal exactly, right? This goal is about looking at the tech industry and saying, why are women underrepresented in tech? And how is it that we take responsibility to correct that in some way? And some of our goals are extremely lofty for the size of the company that we are. But we hope in some way that we also are an example for other organizations to look beyond commercial success and look at what we can do collectively as an organization. So that's a focus for us. Of course, every region is being asked to work towards meeting that 40%. And globally also, we're working towards meeting that 40% women in tech and underrepresented gender minority target. In addition to that, we encourage regions to also have a secondary focus. For example, people of color are underrepresented in the tech industry in some countries. For example, there is a focus on LGBTQ plus people in India. And so that is a secondary or an additional focus that we have. So these are things that one comes in a way directional from the leadership team, but there's a lot that happens grounds up, right? Like, for example, if you look at our focus on people with disability inclusion, for a long time, it was not a focus. But last year, our disability inclusion community at ThoughtWorks, right, came together and said, hey, what are you all doing about disability inclusion in ThoughtWorks, and why can't we do something about it? So what we did last year is we signed the Valuable 500. And the Valuable 500 is 500 organizations coming together, their CEOs signing a commitment to disability inclusion in the organization, right? And so our pledge is up there on their website saying these are the things that we are going to do to be inclusive for people with disability in the organization. So there is both the top-down approach as well as the grounds-up approach that's there. And of course, the usual things, right? Affinity groups, initiatives that we have across. There is a lot of focus on creating a safe workspace, and I'll talk about that a little more. But then operational efficiency is also important, right? You need to have your plan for the year. You need to talk about what is it that you're going to be focused on. How are you working towards meeting that target? Are you looking at metrics? Are you looking at, for example, your hiring metrics? Are you looking at your pipeline? Who are the people who are applying to you? Are you looking at how you're positioning your employer brand? Are you looking at your attrition data? Why are people leaving the organization? How can we create a safer space? So there is this whole thing around policies as well that you need to look at. So there is this, how do you create advancement opportunities? How do you create equal opportunity for all? How do you look at partnering with external organizations to create a safer space? How do you work with your clients and build inclusive software? So it's a pretty large focus that is there, and I'm sure many organizations are doing that right today, versus just a very myopic, narrow view of how you look at DEI.
Absolutely brilliant points, and I think these are required, Tina. I think any organization, while they get started and they have great plans, somewhere I think keeping up the plan gets fizzled out. Any thoughts on why do you think, while great plan, okay, amazing thought processes, but over a period of time it doesn't stay?
I think it's very important for organizations to think about what are the benefits of diversity for the business. And there's no doubt, right? There is benefits of diversity, having a diverse collective within the organization. But it's also true that whether you care about diversity or not, you will have a diverse set of people because, whether it is our identities, our lived experiences, where we come from, the languages we speak, especially in a country like India, diversity is not something that you can just close your eyes to, right? Like it is there everywhere. And so how do organizations work with this diversity and how do you leverage this diversity is very important, right? And then, of course, there is a lot of data that is there, right? Right from the McKinseys of the world to the Deloittes have long reports on the benefits of diversity in the workplace. But I also think collective ownership is important, right? DE&I is not the sole ownership of a leadership team, nor is it of the HR folks, nor is it of the DEI team, but a sense of collective ownership, right? So how do you build that collective ownership within the organization? I think becomes very, very important. I've said this often, that you take any leader in ThoughtWorks and ask them to talk about diversity and inclusion, they would do that very, very easily. But I would say that even thought workers will be able to talk about it, about how important diversity and inclusion is in the workplace. And it's very inbuilt, right? Right from our interview process, we have something called the culture round or the social change round, where we talk about these things and tell candidates why this is important for us at ThoughtWorks. Telling them that, for all you could be having a trans person on your project team. So if you are homophobic, this is not the right place for you. Right? So these are conversations that we have at the interview stage itself. These are conversations that we have externally as well. And then, of course, there's the whole onboarding process where there is a lot of focus around DEI. And then talking about our purpose, why we exist as an organization, what are the things that are important to us, how inclusive we are, how inclusion matters to us. Because inclusion is never like a state, right? You're never 100% inclusive. Because it's always a constant thing that you're working on, because you never know, there are so many identities that are there that without your knowledge itself, very unconsciously, you may be building certain biases. And that's an honesty that I think that all of us need to acknowledge. So definitely collective ownership, looking at benefits of D&I, the context of that industry and that organization, right? Then how do you link diversity and inclusion to your organizational culture, your external context, your business goals? I think is important. And then rigid diversity mandates don't work. This 40% women in tech is a focus for us, but we constantly revisiting to see how we can make it happen and how do we make thought workers part of that entire exercise of making it happen, right? I think acknowledging that there will be people who will question you, there will be dissent. How do you work with that? How do you talk to thought workers? How do you make them understand that this is something that we will collectively drive? I think becomes important as well. So I think this is something that organizations will need to try and build into. And trust me, we are not there yet. It's a constant journey for us as well. And but these are some of our learnings.
If you're saying you are not there yet, I don't know what a lot of organizations will be saying. They are at the baby step then, yes, including KelpHR. Tina, my next question is, while entering women folks, we have 50% of people who graduate and enter, right? But when it comes to even a mid-management level, we just have 18% as per the statistics, right? And then CEO position, we can count on our fingers, I guess. What do you all do differently to ensure that you have retention at a higher level?
That is one of the biggest challenges that every organization has. It's not, just one organization or two, but if anyone really cares deeply about gender diversity in the workplace, I think the biggest challenge is how do you grow your women leaders in the organization? And it is a challenge that we continue to have, right? Of course, there's the usual women in leadership development programs, there is succession planning, there is having role models, there's creating a safe space, there is, the whole bit around career mapping, development plans, efforts that need to be there. But I think what is more important is how do you address things like imposter syndrome? Do you talk about these things within the organization? Do your leaders talk about it? How do you check microaggressions in the workplace? And all of us carry such cognitive differences, right? Like personality types that we are. And then how do you channelize the energies in the right direction? Being able to do that customized support, I think, is very, very important. And one of the things that we are constantly doing is keeping a very strong check around our leadership teams itself, right? How diverse is it? How much representation do we have? And globally, we are about 46% of our leadership team, or 46% are women. I think there needs to be more diversity beyond just women, but we are at 46% now. But I think one thing, and this is something that I have spoken about before, is the Athena Doctrine. Right? This is a book that's been written about why women and men who think like them will rule the future. And this is an interesting book. I think that every woman who aspires to be a leader should read, because a lot of times we attribute leadership skills with masculine traits. How aggressive you are, great at networking, all of that, right? There are lots of other traits like humility, like vulnerability, like intuitiveness, like empathy, long-term thinking, collaboration, which are generally seen as the feminine traits, right? That will get leaders to the next level. And today, these are the leadership traits that are needed in organizations. Like we've seen how leaders like Jacinta Ardern have handled the COVID situation. The fact is that not only women carry these traits, men also carry feminine traits. But I think what traditionally we have looked at is the masculine leadership traits. And I think that needs to be corrected. And you would have more women stepping up to take on leadership roles and being very comfortable with who they are. Because if you're trying to be someone you are not, you will always struggle with your leadership style. And I think that is something that's very, very important. Of course, we have our, at ThoughtWorks, we have the usual leadership development programs. There's a lot of focus on supporting a lot of our leaders who are currently, like, for example, our CEO started as a developer at ThoughtWorks, Goshao. And so many of our leaders today are homegrown leaders. And I think in a way we've been able to do that, but we struggle. I'm telling you, it's really, really difficult to, one is to hire senior women, two is to retain, being able to identify our women leaders. And I think today women should just step up and say, I want to be a leader. What are you going to do to make it happen? And question the organizations about it. And I see that happening, yes.
The next logical question is, what do you think is stopping a lot of Indian organizations from being truly diverse?
I don't know, right? So Indian organizations, when you tell me, right? So there is such a diversity of Indian organizations and sectors and all of that, right? I see that the corporate sector has become a lot more aware about DEI in the workplace today than 4-5 years back, right? But what I think needs to be done is, again, one, there's the whole cultural context around India, right? So who are you hiring? Where are you hiring from? Even if I look at ThoughtWorks India, right, I see a difference when we look at women in tech initiatives or any gender inclusion initiatives. I see that our approach for a Coimbatore is very different from our approach in Bangalore. So keeping the cultural context in mind is important. So that I think is very, very important. Keeping the sector, the workforce. If you are a factory and you have women on the floor, right, in on the factory floor, the approach may be a little different. If you're a corporate, the approach may be a little different. But I think the primary thing should be about creating a safe space for all, right? And making an effort to hire diverse talent. And two, having at a minimal level some bit of governance around creating policies, around creating best practices, around having affinity groups. Those are the simple things, and creating the safe space for people to speak up, ask questions, talk. But all of this needs a leadership team and a leader, who truly believes in the value that diversity, equity, and inclusion brings to the workplace. So I just think that there is so much at the leadership level that needs to be done. In our rush to be profitable, successful businesses, we forget that long-term sustainability and success can only come from an organization that truly believes in diversity and inclusion.
Including inclusion of trans people. You all have so many, I think, trans people in your organization. Do you think it is easy for them to be employed other than in ThoughtWorks? Do you see any challenges that they face, or something that organizations can do differently to accommodate them?
I wish we had a lot of trans people. We don't, but we make a lot of effort to try and identify and hire more trans people into ThoughtWorks. We partner with external organizations like Periphery, Solidarity Foundation to hire, and I think that's one of the things that's been our early learnings, right? In areas where we don't know much about, we identify partners that we can work with, and I think that journey has been pretty good for us. But when it comes to trans people, and there's so much of news, right? Like today, I think there was recent news that the police department has hired trans people. I think how do you retain and create an inclusive space becomes far more important. Some of the things that we have done from a hiring standpoint is, of course, we have the Interning with Pride program. We ran the program a few years back, and we hired 4 people from the community. It was very similar to our Vapasi program, where we offer 4 months of internship and on the project training for people from the LGBTQ plus community. And then we hired them into ThoughtWorks. In fact, we recently announced our Interning with Pride program, which is going to be a virtual program this year. And we are making specific efforts to do an outreach to the trans community to participate in the program. But many of them are not from the tech sector. And being a technology company, we are looking for more. One of the things that we are doing is the upskilling, internship program that we have. We also believe that we need to create a safe space. So ongoing is a sensitization piece, right? LGBTQ plus sensitization is something that's an ongoing effort at ThoughtWorks. We do it on an ongoing basis in offices, projects, and we ensure that people are sensitized. We talk about it as part of our recruitment process, as part of our onboarding process, all of that. And so, and then there is a celebration, right? Coming together as a community, and Pride Month is celebrated widely across ThoughtWorks globally and in India as well. And then, of course, there are policies that are there to back it up, right? Like we have the same-sex partner cover. We have the gender-neutral adoption leave policy. We have surrogacy as part of our policy that's covered, right? And gender affirmation and transition in the workplace policy that's specifically for trans people, right? If you want to go through gender affirmation and transition, how can we support you through that entire journey? And not just about that period, right? But through the entire period of that transition, how do we support you? Anti-sexual, and we have worked with you all on that. Our anti-sexual harassment policy is gender neutral, and we one of the first companies to sort of introduce LGBTQ plus as part of that as well. Preferred name and pronoun is something that's part of our HRMS and our staffing tool. right? And our EAP folks are trained. We have trained professionals who can support LGBTQ plus. The amount of discrimination the community faces is not small, right? And we need to do a lot to create a safe space for them. Within our workplaces and outside as well. And one of the things that we also do is that we work very closely with the external community to see how we can support and partner over there as well. But trans inclusion is a long, long way to go.
Absolutely. I was having a conversation with one of the trans activists, and she was saying how she's working with employing folks in various sectors. She's saying getting employment, as you rightly said, right? Getting employment is not difficult, but managing or maintaining that employment is difficult. She said she ended up having 14-member team in one of the logistics company, but all of them quit. The reason was a safe space was not created for them.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
They go back to begging, which they feel that is okay for them. And I was listening to one conversation where Amazon, a lady from Amazon, a senior person, she says that, they make more money begging rather than coming and delivering goods. So that is also another challenge. Maybe, they are not compensated well enough. Just a thought. I don't know how we will tide over it, but these are the things that keeps coming back to us.
Yeah, but there are challenges, right? But I think once the corporate sector really needs to open up, and a lot of other sectors as well, right? I think the unconscious bias, I mean, consciously you would see that a lot of people will not, but there is a lot of unconscious bias that we need to address, especially with the LGBTQ folks in the workplace. So I think that is something that the microaggressions that are there in the workplace, especially that the community faces, is something that we need to address and really sensitize.
Taking that forward, that y'all are working in a lot of awareness that is created in while recruitment and while skilling them. So, is there something that can be done? I don't know from your perspective. I'm just throwing a thought that when I was speaking to this trans person, what she said is, as a child, I was bullied a lot.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to a school and you know that you're distinctly different, right?
Yes.
How it impacts. She says, my confidence level was not zero, it was in minus. Okay. So, which was such a sharp statement for me. It took me a minute to gather myself when I heard it. So, is there anything, I don't know, yours is a very large organization. I'm just seeding a thought that can something be done at that level?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of organizations that are working at creating and sensitizing at the school level. It also depends on how progressive the school is as well, right? But nothing stops us from talking to our children at home. I have taken my daughters for pride marches. I've taken them for candlelight protests. And we have these conversations, right, about bullying, and very few children escape bullying. This is something that I constantly look at in my two daughters. Body shaming is a reality. I mean, it happens at a very, very young age in schools. And you're constantly talking to your kids and you wonder where the other influence is coming from, right? Because sometimes the external influences are more than the influence that you can have, depending on where your child is and all of that. So creating awareness is important at the school levels. But I think one of the things that organizations can do is also look at, see, CSR is mandatory now. So one of the things is how you can tie your CSR to your DEI efforts. If, for example, you want to focus on LGBTQ plus inclusion, then one part of your CSR budget can go towards supporting organizations who are in the LGBTQ plus inclusion space and who are working in the sensitization space as well. And there are lots of organizations who are doing this. So basically, you support that, and that's the approach we've taken in ThoughtWorks. There's so much that we can collaborate on, and I've said this before as well, right? Especially in the DI space, I've seen very less competition. It's always about learning from each other, wanting to tap into, the ideas that another organization has. I think we can really come together to drive some really positive social change if you want to. And I think that should be our mindset about looking beyond just, our organizational goals.
How do we go about launching and growing employee resource groups? Do they form organically, or does HR create them?
Yeah, it depends on where your organization is in your entire inclusion journey, right? Sometimes it's owned by the HR team, sometimes it's owned by the DI team, sometimes it's just a collective of employees coming together and saying, "Hey, we are creating this group that needs to be recognized." Right, and we are working towards, for example, LGBTQ plus inclusion or a safer space or an intersectional group, right? I think it's very important for organizational leaders to recognize these bodies and give it the due support. Some of our best inputs have come from our ERGs, or our affinity groups. Mitra Collective, which is our LGBTQ plus inclusion group, and Women at ThoughtWorks, which is for women at ThoughtWorks. And we are starting another one this year, which is called the intersectional group. We're yet to find the right name, but we're saying, irrespective of who you are, what your identity is, if you care about inclusion in the workplace, come be part of it. And so it could be people from diverse backgrounds, from educational backgrounds to cities to languages, people with disability. So we're creating this group for people to come together and participate and talk and see how we can build a more inclusive organization. So I think it's very important that when we look at ERGs or affinity groups, one very important thing for ERGs is to have some sort of a stakeholder, as part of it, right? Sort of someone who's saying from the leadership saying, "I stand by this." So ERGs should have someone who is a key stakeholder. They should also have objectives saying that this is the objective of this group, and collectively this is what we will work on. And they should be inclusive of all, right? Because allyship is about, you can't really question allies. So when you have a group, don't make it only for a particular community, but also extend it to its allies, right? But at the same time, creating a safe space for the marginalized group. Eventually, as you progress, you should see how you can get, for example, budgets to celebrate, participate, how you can influence policies within the organization, how do you influence sensitization and awareness sessions within the organization, how do you create a space for people to come and approach you if they are facing any issues and want to talk about it. All of that. The Mitra Collective, LGBTQ plus ERG, has done so much of work in the inclusion space in ThoughtWorks. Anytime someone applies to us from the community and they identify as LGBTQ plus, one of the things that we do is immediately map them to someone from the Mitra Collective, so that there is that support system that's there from the start of the process till they are onboarded and mentored within the organization. So I think there is a big role that affinity groups or ERGs play in creating that safe space, and we should encourage it. I think sometimes organizational leaders feel like, oh my God, this ERG is going to question our every move, all of that. But I think this is something that creates so much of engagement in the organization and involvement, right? And that's the biggest thing we are struggling with the pandemic today. How do you create a space for employees to engage? And I think ERGs provide that space for engagement and also for sustainable long-term investment in a particular area of focus.
Do you think people are excited to be part of this ERG group? They on their own nominate themselves, or?
Depends. For example, we say that sometimes a group comes together and then they announce it in the ThoughtWorks India, mailing group, and they ask people to sign up. Then we have office level representatives, and then they will get involved in initiatives at their office level. There's a lot of sharing that happens between offices. There's a lot of influence that happens at the India level. So I think people are excited, but at the same time is a constraint, I think. So you constantly need to encourage and prod people to participate and think. I think creating a safe space becomes very important then, Smita.
One final question. Does diversity positively correlate with workplace safety? Please share your thoughts on that.
Not just diversity, but equity, inclusion, belonging. It's like an open funnel. You can go and bring in as many diverse people as you want, as diverse community that you want. But if you are not inclusive, if you are not equitable, if you don't create a space where you belong, it's like a leaking funnel, right? People are going to leave. I just think that safety can only come when I have a voice. I belong here. I can question and I'm treated equitably. And it is an ongoing journey of having that feeling, right? Even within the family, you have people who say, I don't feel safe here, or I don't think y'all are listening to me. You often hear children saying that, right? You're not listening to me. You're looking at it from my perspective, from my point of view. So it's not. I often say this, right? Even within the unit of a family, it's such a struggle, and I'm sure the pandemic has drawn us all closer, but there have been challenges as well, right? Like, you're spending so much of time with each other that you realize that to come together as a unit, there's so much that you need to adjust, you need to accommodate, you need to empathize, you need to look from a different perspective, look at the identities that own person carries, their experiences. So if that is happening within that small unit of a family, then you can imagine what's happening at an organizational level. So I think we need to give ourselves a pat in the back wherever we are on that journey and say, hey, this is tough. This is something we will always continue to do, and we will hold ourselves accountable to making this happen. Because it's not going to be easy. And sometimes I think it's so heavy on the leadership, right, of the organization saying, hey, this is not working. We received this complaint. We have this issue. I constantly have to remind myself too that this is not easy. This is something that we will, no matter where we are on that journey, there's still so much more to do.
Thank you so much. What I hear from you is that get started. Don't think that you will reach a destination. Okay. But you've started, or you've set a step ahead. That means you're doing the right thing. Have I said it right, Tina?
Absolutely. And you will be amazed at the benefits it brings, both direct and indirect. So please look at, if you haven't started on your diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, please do. And you would be amazed how it helps the organization in so many ways, right? But most of all, building that collective and the culture of inclusion, I think, is one of the biggest benefits of it.
Thank you very much for this candid conversation. I think a lot of organizations will learn so many inputs from ThoughtWorks, our model company, right? Thank you very much for giving your time today.
Thank you, Smita. It was lovely talking to you.